and I want to welcome him to Matters of Faith tonight. Good evening, my brother. How are you?
Good evening, brother. How's it going?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Now, is it possible for me to see your face? If not, we'll have to listen to your voice. Oh, there you go. There you go. Now you get the handsome face up there. That's what I was looking for. How are you?
Man, you know what I was doing wrong?
What's that?
I was looking at email, man, instead of text.
Oh, okay. 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 But that's okay. Hey, listen, we where we are now, and that's a great thing. We got you where we need to have you. And so listen, I wanted to share this with you because I just read your bio and everybody knows all of the things about you that were written. But tell us something about you, Peter, that we don't know and we really should know.
Well, I'm not sure. I accept that I'm a very strong Pan-Africanist, which means that I believe that the fate of people of African descent depends very much on the connection between the people on the continent and those of us in North America.
Mm-hmm.
The ones in other places will follow us, but we got to be the leaders. I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama, and I'm telling you, brother, although I'm a strong Pan-Africanist now, when I was growing up in Tuskegee, between the ages of about 6 and 13, I would go to Tarzan movies almost every Saturday with my friends. And we would sit in that movie theater, in a segregated movie theater, all theater full of Black kids. And we would cheer Tarzan and Cheetah, as they beat up on the African people.
Right.
And then when the African people, would talk among themselves, they spoke their own languages. So we would laugh at them because we felt as though they couldn't speak English. So we laughed. And this went on, and I can remember as a child, you could call people, like curse names. I can't say them on the air, but you know the names I'm talking about.
Right.
Somebody, one of the curse names, and they might fight you.
You
call them African or Black, you had a fight. You had a fight. And so I didn't really discover anything, and I'm serious, brother. I was a very good student in elementary school, high school, top student. I joined the military at 17, and I didn't join for no patriotic reasons. I joined because I'll get the GI Bill to help pay the way to college.
Okay. Well, you had a strategy. You had a plan.
Right. I joined at 17 out of high school, got out when I was 20, and I went to Howard University. And it was at Howard University where I was, for the first time, learned about our history.
Wow.
I had a professor named Dr. Harold Lewis. And Dr. Lewis was one of those people, man. He taught us, he said to us the very first day of class, all your life, you studied the history of people of European descent. In this class, you go study and learn the history of the rest of the people in the world. And that's where I was introduced to African history, African American history, some Chinese history, some Japanese history, and some Native American history. And I became a strong history buff from that time on. And then, of course, when I met Brother Malcolm, it just reinforced that. But I grew up, man. I did not know anything about our history until I was 20 years old. The only thing I knew, I grew up in Tuskegee, so of course I knew the names of Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver.
What's interesting about what you're saying is that I'm a little younger than you are, but we went to see those same movies. Tarzan was everybody's hero, and everybody knew how to do that. And so, yeah, you're right. And you talked about this in some of your productions and certainly some of the interviews I've looked at just to prepare myself to entertain you and to have you on tonight. But one of the things that you talked about, which was really, really interesting to me, was that you said during that time that was an attack on the mentality and the mindset of American Black folks in particular that nobody really recognized at the time.
Yes. When people ask me, what was it that initially attracted you to Malcolm X when you heard him speak? And I always tell them, I moved to Harlem in the summer of 1962. I was 24 years old. I moved to Harlem. I moved in on a Friday night. And instead of getting up and unpacking the next day, we decided to, a friend who helped me move, we decided to walk down Lenox Avenue, which is now Malcolm X Boulevard.
Right.
So we walked down Lenox Avenue. So we walked down, got to 125th Street I was on 142nd Street. Got to 125th Street and decided to keep going. We got down to 116th Street and there was a crowd gathering. So we said, what's going on? And they said, Malcolm X is going to speak.
Mm.
And so I had heard of him very vaguely, usually negative type things.
Mm-hmm.
We say, let's hear what he's got to say. And that brother spoke for almost 3 hours.
Mm.
He talked a lot about our history during that presentation. But the thing that really hit me, because like I said, I had finally been introduced to our history at 20 years old at Howard. He talked about attacks on the mind. I had never heard anybody talk about that. He talked about attacks on the mind.
Wow.
And then he went on and explaining how the school system, the whole system has been attacking the mind of our people. And if anybody remembers, saw a classic example, is remember the movie Roots?
Yes, sir.
Remember the scene in Roots, that powerful scene when they first capture Kunta Kinte? And he meets this enslaver, and he said, your name is going to be Toby. And Kunta Kinte said,
no, it's Kunta.
He said Toby. And then he had him sent in and beaten by this African man, and until he called himself, and then he came back out and he called himself Toby.
Right.
It was double, that he could take your very name. That's psychological.
Yeah.
I can take your name away. That was combining the physical and the psychological.
Hmm.
I can take your name away. And then if you don't want to do it, then I can get somebody who looks like you to beat you.
Now that's interesting because in our communities, I guess we still have folks like that. I think Malcolm used to call them, he didn't call them just Uncle Toms, he called them house Negroes. He said, house Negroes versus the field Negroes.
Yes, yes.
One of my favorite conversations that he gave, I listened to, I have a lot of his speeches. If I don't have them all, but I have a lot of them. And he was one of the persons that I admired most. I mean, I grew up in New York, so I was born and raised right here in New York, born in Harlem Hospital, raised in the Bronx. So, there was an admiration for Malcolm going back to my childhood because people like that militant stand, that in your face kind of a thing. We're New Yorkers, we like being in your face. We like that. So, yes, go ahead, please.
I lived in Harlem, for 24 years. And I consider them probably the 24 most significant years of my life.
Mm.
Having met Brother Mel, and then so many other people. That's where I met John Henry Clark and Harold Cruz, and some absolutely brilliant Black people I met while I was there.
Right.
But unfortunately, I think that too many of our people, even today, brother, understand how they get entrapped in psychological warfare and how things they do, exhibit this without them even realizing it. When you still hear Black people say, she's dark, but pretty. You hear that today.
Yeah.
She's dark, but pretty. And that's just one, and we still use Black as an epithet. You can't just be a no good, what. You got to be a no good Black, what.
Yeah.
I just saw just recently a mother scolding her child. And she didn't say, get your behind over here. And I'm kind of cleaning it up a little bit. She said, get your Black so-and-so over here.
Right.
So those are the kind of things which show us that we still have not dealt sufficiently. And I feel one of the things that really annoys me about much of today's leadership, they don't talk about this area of psychological warfare. And this is very, very, very important if you're going to talk about healing and advancing and making us in a better position to promote and protect our interests in this white supremacist society. We still do not really understand how vicious and really, unfortunately, how successful the white supremacists have been in treating us and using psychological warfare on us.
What's that test that was done with the babe with the little dolls and such? You remember
Yes,
that test? That's
yes,
a part of it too, right? That we tend to prefer that which is light skinned or lighter
yes,
skinned or white skinned versus the black skin, the dark skin.
yes, yes. I got a picture that I always tease my sisters and uh, my female first cousins about. We took a family picture when we were all like very young, and a group picture, and it was Christmas time,
Mm-hmm.
and every little girl in that picture had a white doll in her arm.
Wow. Everybody, huh?
Every single one, man. And I said to myself, until I met Brother Malcolm, I didn't think
Mm,
about that kind of thing.
mm.
I didn't think about that kind of thing. And then once I met him and been listening to him talk, because he spent a lot of his time talking about attacks on the mind. That was one of the things that really attracted me to him, that I had never in my life heard anyone talk. And then later, of course, I heard Frances Cress Welsing. She talked a lot about this. But even today, man, you don't hear practically any so-called Black leaders talk about, hardly any time talking about psychological warfare and what it has done to us and what it continues to do to us because we don't even recognize it.
Talk about that a little bit, Peter, if you will, how that impacts us today and what type of psychological warfare are we dealing with? Because a lot of people won't necessarily recognize the attacks that's going on subliminally. I remember when I was in college, I read a book called Subliminal Seduction. And that book talked about how we are programmed subconsciously to purchase things, to buy things. We're purposely programmed by commercials and things like that to think in a particular way. Now, that's mind control from a media perspective, but psychological warfare works on the same principles.
On the same principle. Look at us as a people. We spend $1.3 trillion a year as a group of people. And we probably give at least 1 trillion of that money to other racial and ethnic groups
Mm,
instead of spending among ourselves.
right.
We give other people our money because we don't support each other in that kind of way. First of all, we rarely talk about economics.
Mm,
All we talk about is electoral politics
mm,
and civil rights. Well, Brother Malcolm taught us, and I learned, and it was further reinforced when I later met people like Harold Cruz and John Henry Clark and people like that, that you will never in this society have political power without economic power. Never.
mm-hmm.
You may have a limited degree of political influence, but you will never have political power without economic power. Right. And until we understand that and start spending as much time talking about economics as we do about electoral politics, then we're going to be in trouble. I would recommend that everybody who should read a book by Professor James, oh brother, now I can't think of the brother's name. He wrote a book called Black Money Matters. I'll get his name. But he talked a book about Black Money Matters. And he talks about how psychologically we have swallowed to such an extent that we give everybody, that's all part of psychological. You know, when a store does something, when a store, let's say, just mistreats or something like that, instead of saying, we want to get outside and chant and wave flags, no justice, no peace, and that kind of stuff. But all we got to do is go to those people and say, listen, man, we just found out that we are 40% of your profits. You do something about that situation, or we ain't buying from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That'll be much more effective than chanting in the streets and running through the streets and doing all that stuff that we love to do so much today. It is really, 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 man. This combination.
So you kind of agree with me. I'm not a street kind of evangelist, if you will. I'm more of a let's sit down at the table and make this happen. Let's do that. Let's sit down. Let's negotiate. Let's make this happen. And if you don't meet the needs that we're looking to satisfy, then we're not going to spend any of our money with you. I think that works.
But the first thing we do, we want to jump out there and start waving flags and chanting justice, no peace, and sometimes, ransacking stores and all that kind of silly stuff.
Right.
It doesn't do anything to promote and advance our interests. Instead of doing that, all we got to do is go to. I remember when that boy was killed in that town, and the black folks were 65% of the population of that town. They didn't have to demonstrate 1 second. All they do is go to those white boys who own the 35% white population, those white boys who own those stores, and say, "We ain't buying nothing from y'all till y'all do something about that policeman killing that boy." That's all we had to do.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, right? Because Dr. King had that understanding, because the last event that he attended was for the sanitation strikers in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was for economics.
Yes.
Economics. How was the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama successful? It's because they economically, they put a dent in the economics of that city, in that town, and that's what happened. And when
but brother, that is not the way it is presented to people.
Oh, I know.
When they teach in the schools,
yeah.
When they celebrate Dr. King's birthday, that's all they talk about is they prayed and they blah blah blah. Those boys in Montgomery, Alabama, those white boys who own those buses, they changed what they were doing because they were losing thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah.
But it is never, the Montgomery boycott, except in few instances, is never presented like this. It's presented that they demonstrated and they prayed and they did this, and these white boys then changed their mind. No, they did not, man. They changed their mind because they were losing thousands of dollars weekly because of that book. I was in Tuskegee at the time. That's my home.
Right.
And in Tuskegee is about 30 miles from Montgomery. And I can remember black people in Tuskegee would drive down to Montgomery to help drive people around, to transport them, so they would not have to ride those buses. We would be in a much better.
A unified and coordinated effort that people engaged in, and they were working on that together. That's one of the things I think we lack today. We don't have that sense of shared responsibility.
No. We simply think that talking loud and chanting and all is going to change something, but it's not. It's not. In this society, it is the money. I tell people all the time, if you're a politician and somebody come to me and say, "I'm going to give you $10,000," and somebody else say, "I got 10,000 votes for you," they go in with the person with the $10,000 because they figure they can take that $10,000 and buy your votes plus another 5,000 or 6,000. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Everything on electoral politics and practically nothing on economics and culture. Look, there are people in this country, there are groups in this country who have become millionaires off of our culture, our music, our dance, our theater, the films we make. Other people is making most of the money on that.
Yes.
Even in 2022. We do not understand the whole question of, we do not understand or even try to use more effectively our collective economic potential. We have serious potential economic power, but we don't use it.
Peter, I'm gonna hold you for a second. I'm having some difficulty for some reason or another with my broadcast going to Facebook. I'm gonna do something for those of you who are watching. I'm gonna stop the broadcast momentarily, then I'm going to put it back up to see whether or not that fixes the problem. You and I will be here, but I want to see if I can stop the stream and then start it again, and then everybody else can come in. So y'all bear with me. I'm going to do that now, and then I'm going to come back in. We're going to try it again. All right. So Peter, stay with me for just a minute. Give me a moment. Take a deep breath, and we're going to make this happen. But we're going to fix this, because I don't believe the enemy can't get away with even with this. So we got just give me a minute. I need to set it up right. Whenever it seems like we get to these really important topics, we get all kind of stuff coming up. You know that, right? We get all kind of kind of things that come up and pop in. So here we go. Let's try it again. Okay, we can start talking again, Peter. I'm on, and I'm going to share it with the rest. I'm going to share it with the rest of the people in just a minute. I'm going to go here, look at it. Yep, there we go. So now let's see how we did. Let's see if I can share it with everybody the way I normally do. Share. Posted. Let's see how it works on this side. We are on, sir. We are corrected. We're good. All right. So now let me get back. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to see if I can get back to this now. Everybody else, y'all get back on. I hope y'all got it. Good. So here we go. Let me ask you this question. I want you to talk about this video, this play that you wrote, because you're talking about it, and I'm hearing you. It's called Malcolm, Martin, Negger.
Uh-huh.
Talk about that for a moment, because that really unpacks for me a lot of what you've been discussing in terms of the economic as well as the psychological warfares that we're facing, and what you think and how you believe the people that we know to be the martyrs of our time, Martin, Malcolm, Medgar, and how they would be responding to today's scenario and situations. Now I know you're going, because you wrote that play with 2016 or 15 or something like that.
I started writing that play back in the early 2000s. I've had readings of it, since then. But I worked in that play for about 12 years or so.
Wow. Before
I finally, introduced it publicly at various readings.
Got you.
Dramatic readings of it. Well, what happened is, when I lived in Harlem, I was also there at the time when this great, we almost call it, sometimes people call it the second Harlem Renaissance started. All the great Black people in New York were doing incredible theater and dance, Alvin Ailey,
Right.
And music and all that kind of stuff, was really big. And I was on the staff of Ebony magazine for 8 years during that stretch. And since I was in New York, I did a lot of coverage of the cultural scene for Ebony. And one of the things I had to do was to go to a lot of plays. And I went to, I was fortunate enough to come on the staff of Ebony at a time when finally the Broadway shows finally started giving Ebony magazine recognition. So the Ebony magazine editor in New York, which I was, you got free tickets on the second night to every show that opened on Broadway. Every show that opened on Broadway. So I was doing a lot of theater. And I know that, of course, they were not doing any kind of serious Black theater. Then I began to see these Black theater companies, and they were doing some incredible stuff in New York at that time. Great plays, man. That's why I saw Denzel for the first time in a play for one of those back there. A lot of the people who you see now came out of that era. Anna Maria Hall.
Every Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m.
Yes.
The radio show is live.
Go ahead. Sorry about that. That's not a problem. Go ahead. Continue. So I saw Denzel actually with the image. I think the first time I saw him was in a Soldier's play.
I saw Denzel the first time in a one-act play where he played Brother Malcolm.
Oh,
and
really?
I will tell you, I went to the play, brother, with an attitude. I say, because when it comes to Brother Malcolm, man,
right.
You got to show me. You got to show me. Man, Denzel did that thing. So I was sitting there, and this was a small Black theater run by a Black director and everything. And when I saw that play, I'm sitting there watching Denzel, man. I'm almost falling off my seat, man. It was so brilliant. That was my introduction to Denzel Washington. That was my introduction. And I became a fan. And now anything he's in, I go see. I don't know if I like anything he's in, but I go see it because I know this brother can read. But
he's
out of that, I saw the power
Yeah.
what theater can do. I thought what theater can do to help people see themselves in a different light, to get a glimpse. You can write plays that have a historical context. You can write plays that have a modern day context. You can write, and I saw all kinds of plays by these Black playwrights.
Mm.
And so finally, one time, and then I began, I was reading, stuff, and I always believed that this society, most of the coverage in this society of Brother Malcolm, Medgar Evers, and Dr. King is just simply not correct.
Right.
They misinform, they distort it. And I said, I'm tired of this.
Mm.
I'm gonna try my bit at writing a play. I had never written a play in my life. I had seen a whole lot of plays.
Mm.
But I said, I think I'm gonna write a play. And originally it's gonna be Malcolm and Martin.
Right.
Then I caught myself. I said, wait a minute, because I'm a big fan of Medgar Evers, boy. I think that brother does not get the justice that he deserves. Because he was down there in Mississippi, man.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
You fight in New York and Chicago, that's one thing. You down there in Mississippi fighting, man, you on the front lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to call the play Malcolm, Martin, Medgar. And I put it in alphabetical order, so can nobody say that I put
right, you first. Malcolm over Martin or Medgar, yeah.
Malcolm, Martin, Medgar. And what I did, what I was basically saying is, we have not lived up to what those brothers were telling us and teaching us to do.
Mm.
We have not done it. And so I had them like they're in the hereafter, and they're looking down and commenting on things that have happened since their assassinations and what is going on. And they go, and some of it's funny, they joke sometimes, and that's not all, total seriousness, but they discuss different things that happened while they were alive. They talk about their assassinations.
Right.
They talk about what we're doing. And sometimes during the play, I have them, point to something that's going on. Look at that guy down there with that blonde wig on. What's going on? What's happening down there? That kind of thing. They would be pointing to people, here who are still here. You mean we did all that and people walk around with all these blonde wigs? So it's like I say, it's not all deep seriousness.
Right.
But most people now, I've only had what they call dramatic readings of the play.
Mm-hmm.
I've only seen 2 full-scale productions, and that was done at a high school by high school students. And I must say they did a pretty good job of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was kind of nervous. I said these high school students, but I talked to them before the play and gave them an idea, and they really enjoyed it, man. They really enjoyed the play. But at the end of the play, brother, and this is where a lot of people find it fascinating. I have, after they've been talking all the things they've done and the things they've seen and the things that have happened since they were assassinated and this kind of thing, Brother Malcolm said, let me ask you brother something. Martin, you could have been like the president of Morehouse. You had done a whole lot. Can't nobody say you not done a whole lot for Black folk. But you could have said, hey, wait a minute, man, I got to do something more for my family. Because all 3 of them left families who were not taken care of.
Mm.
Their families basically suffered after they were assassinated. Because they didn't have no money.
Right, no insurance, nothing like that.
So they said, brother Martin, you probably could have been the president of Morehouse, something like that. And Brother Malcolm, he said, Medgar, you could have been, like a big time lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
Civil rights lawyer, and all this time. He said, and I had plenty of offers to go to Africa. Several African countries that offered me come over and teach and that kind of thing. And I would take my family and move to Africa. And then he said, let me ask you something. If you had to do it all over again, would you do everything the same?
Mm.
To the point of being assassinated?
Mm.
And Martin and Medgar say, well, I had to think about that. And then Brother Malcolm turns to the audience and says, we need to all think about that.
Mm.
And then the light goes out. That's the end of the play. And the reason I do that is that I'm saying again, that those brothers gave their lives for us, and we have not followed what they were telling us to do and showing us how to do it and fighting for us to get. And as far as I'm concerned, we can do all this stuff we want to by having, Malcolm X Day and Martin Luther King holiday, but the best way to pay tribute to and to honor these brothers' memories is to carry out the stuff that they were advocating for us to do as a group of people. And we have not done it, and we have not done it to this very day.
I totally agree with you. I did a workshop way back in the 80s. I think it was 1986. I did this work, like a self-awareness kind of a workshop. It was in California. It was 6 days. I mean, crazy stuff. We rappelled off the side of a mountain, did the zip line, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we did literally transformed my life. And it was essentially it was a war game. And I was the daimyo, the head person in charge on my side. And so in this workshop that I did, there were 99 people in attendance. I was the only person of color there. And so they chose me on one side to be their leader. Now, in the process of doing this, I wound up getting killed by the other daimyo. I died. And what happened was, because of the nature of the game, I don't want to go into all the details, nature of the game was that my folks, the survivors, because we defeated everybody on that side, so that the other ruler challenged me, he won. So my people, which was about 14 left out of the 50 that was there, they had a choice. They could either go with and serve this guy, or they could commit harikari, they could commit suicide. Mm-hmm. All of them committed suicide. Mm-hmm. Now, when I was brought back to life so I could speak to the people, and everybody who died before they came out, they were sitting around big. So like what you're saying, right? They came out, now they can have this conversation. All these people who had died, now they're coming out having conversation. People crying because some people died before the game got started. I mean, before they even got a chance to get into it, they died. And it was a reflection of what kind of life they lived. For me, when I was finally able to speak, I said to the people, I said, I know what Malcolm, Martin, and Medgar probably felt. When they died, all that they lived for went with them. And I said, and I was so disappointed because all of the people who were on our side, on my side with us, instead of you going and empower these people, in other words, give him something that he didn't have so that you can make the world what you wanted it to be, you committed harikari, you all killed yourselves. Now the world was essentially lost. The only person was left was this one leader, but everybody else in the world was dead. And I said, the feeling I was saying, the feeling that Malcolm and Martin and Medgar must have had is like, we gave our lives for this cause, and nobody's following it up. We're committing suicide. We're shooting each other randomly, killing each other, slaughtering each other on the streets. That's suicide by another person's hand. It breaks my heart when I think about the commitment, the dedication, and the sacrifice that Malcolm, Martin, Medgar made, and now how we're treating that sacrifice. Now, I know you said, go ahead, I'm sorry, you go ahead, because I don't want to.
And they gave us concrete guidelines to follow.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, they gave us concrete guidelines to follow. One of which, of course, was an absolute necessity for unity. For us to act as a unit. This does not mean that everybody got to think exactly alike.
Right.
But it does mean that we move when we get together, we argue, we discuss, and then we come out with some concrete program. Then we all support it.
Right. Right.
Follow it, and unity, and we work with each other. They talk about the fact that of how how they struggled to try to make us aware of some of the things. How they try to get information onto us that some of the things, problems that we're having today is because we are not doing what we should be doing as a people. Mm. We really have not, to me, and not just Malcolm, Martin, Medgar. I'm talking about all those.
That's right. That's right. Right. All the murder sacrifice.
I'm talking about,
right.
although she wasn't assassinated, I'm talking about Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Down in Mississippi, people like that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not just talking about those three brothers. I'm talking about all those folks who put their lives on the line and who got beaten and bit by police dogs, all that kind of in the 1960s.
Right.
We have not, as a group of people. Now we have individual people who worked hard, you know, and try to carry out the legacy of these three brothers. We really do.
Yeah.
There are Black folks all over this country who really tried to do this.
Right.
But the majority of us, unfortunately, the overwhelming majority, have not done it. As a result, we're being basically kind of kicked around and pushed around today in a way that to me, you know, and this is where people get on my case about. I don't blame everybody else, brother, for what happens to us nowadays. I put some of the fault on us. I put some of the fault on us because the reason that people are able to do certain things to us is because we are not doing the things collectively that we should be doing in order to promote and protect our interests.
That's very true. That's very true.
I told people I would love to have a conference, Black folks, and I would love to have a conference where we focus on our strengths. You know, too often when we get together at conference, we say, "Oh Lord, have mercy, woe is us. Oh, we poor and poor." You know, that kind of attitude. We need to have a conference that focuses on our strengths, our economic strengths, our cultural strengths, our political strengths, our educational strengths, our communication strengths, our technological strengths, and our legal strengths. Have each one of these categories, and then have people who have expertise in each one of these areas pull together that area and come up with concrete ways in all of these different areas that we can promote and protect our interests in this society. I really think it would be very important. And I tell people, the first time we got together at a conference, I would stand up in about the first 5 minutes. I say, "Oh man, white supremacists, white folks do this." I spent about 10 minutes telling the horror story. Then I would say, "You know one thing? Now I don't want to hear the word white folks for the next 2 days. All I want to hear is what we're gonna do."
Yeah. Speaking of do,
I don't go to conferences anymore, but we spend all our time wailing, weeping and wailing with white folks. We already know that.
I agree. Yeah, let's get some action. Let's get some things done.
Get together. What we talking about is what are we going to do about these things?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? You know, we don't need to recite the horrors. We all know those stories. Get together and talk about what are we going. To me, everything nowadays, brother, has got to be solutions oriented. If I read columns by people, I don't read columns by people who just describe horror stories. If you describe something, here's the blah, 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 then you say, now here's what we can do about it. Or if you don't know, when you write an article, a column or something in that area, you go to somebody who does know and say, according to so-and-so, so-and-so, here's what we should do about this. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Everything should be solutions oriented.
Let me share a couple things with you, and then I want you to talk about your new book. There was, I have a lot of relations with the police department here in New York, and so I was able to create this, initiate a meeting, and the meeting was with the chief of community affairs and one of the deputy commissioners for the police department, and I had young people come in and talk. We met together, and so the conversation was, and I told them, I don't need you to tell the story about everything that's going wrong in your life. Everybody already knows that. But I want you to think about what the solutions are to some of these problems. I want you to don't tell me the story. I said, because if you tell the story, all we'll do is sit there and we'll commiserate together in the sorrow, in the muck, and the mire. No. You need to come with some solutions. This is the problem. This is what we think you can do to solve it. Now, one thing that came out of that, right? What came out of it immediately was that the students said something that the commissioner and the chief of community was not aware of. And this was it. Students were being literally arrested when they were jumping the turnstiles to go to school because they had lost or misplaced their their Metro card to get on the train. So they would jump in the turnstile to go to school, but they were being detained and then they were missing school, which affects their entire life. You know that, right? So
Right.
so the chief said, well, wait a minute. He said, well, what's the problem with just replacing the card? If they lose it, just give them another one, right? You know how long it takes? You know how long it takes the Board of Ed in New York to replace a Metro card in New York?
How long?
4 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
they immediately said, do not arrest any student that hops the train to go to school.
Right.
Because you detain them, they miss school. Excellent students, right? Excellent students. But now you're giving them a record, you're giving them a citation, a desk appearance ticket. They got to miss this day of school, that day. No, stop it. So what I like what you're saying about solutions. We don't we know the story. Let's get to the solutions. And I think let's work. I'll work with you on this convention. I think it's a great idea. I love it. I love it. I think it's great. I think we ought to be doing more of that.
Right. And I think what we can do it instead of for the first time, all of us, we should have it do it regionally.
Right.
We have a conference in the Northeast, a conference in the South, a
right.
conference in the Southeast,
West, South, and Midwest, the whole bit. That's right.
In Midwest.
That's right.
And each one, then we eventually, get together and come up.
Right.
Right.
I agree. Matters of family, y'all hear that, right? Y'all hear that? Y'all hear we're making some solutions. Y'all listen to that because I want your input so that we can make this happen. This should not be just a conversation. This has to be a reality.
Yes.
So Matters of Faith family, y'all put your thinking caps on, and y'all can start to respond to me because I want to hear that. Now, Doctor, do me a favor, Brother Peter. Would you please talk about your new book?
Okay. Well, one of the things.
Hold on. Wait, let me just do this because if you go into the new book, I'm at the top of the hour. Let me read the article again, reintroduce you, and then I'm gonna let you talk about the new book. And what I'm going to do while you're talking about the new book, I'm going to show some pictures of Malcolm that one of my friends, Brother Earl Harley, who was he's a Malcolmite also, and these are photos that he took of Malcolm when Malcolm was speaking on the street. So I'm gonna put those on the screen as you talk about your new book. So let me do that. Let me go and reread this article so that everybody's on the same page, just in case they didn't have a chance to read the article themselves. They'll be able to listen to it as it is being read. So just bear with me for a few minutes. This will take a couple of minutes, but it won't be long. Let me share my screen again, and then we'll get started, and then we'll go ahead and do that. All right. So just bear with me, everybody. We're going to do this way. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 9, New International Version. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all, by any means necessary. The phrase by any means necessary is arguably the most well-known saying of Malcolm X, or El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. It was born out of his great faith in God. This black nationalist was famously noted for his rejection of integration while promoting the separation of races. Nothing bothered him as much as the lack of unity between black people, which he saw as a direct result of centuries of enslavement. His famous quote was to encourage Afro-Americans, as we called them, to claim their rights, their respect, and their freedom by creating a separate nation within the borders of the United States of America. There is significant power in the quote, by any means necessary. When Malcolm spoke these words, he was an opponent of integration as well as a non-violent movement. He was convinced that the races could not coexist and equality could only be achieved if violence was met with violence and a separate state established for black people. That was his early belief, and he stood by it. But he could never have imagined that those same words would eventually become critically important to the non-violent protests and to his transformed position on integration. By any means necessary, advanced to include both nonviolence and integration as a means to claim freedom. Words can be transformative not only to the hearer, but to the speaker as well. When Malcolm embarked on his Hajj to Mecca, He witnessed people of every race coming together to worship the same God in the same tradition he did in America. He was transformed from a strict nationalist into an internationalist who promoted the unity of black people worldwide. His narrow use of the phrase "by any means necessary" was exponentially expanded and became his unofficial battle cry for African American unity worldwide. His creation of the Organization for Afro-American Unity was the evidence of his transformation, which went beyond race to include humanity. His new world view defined his life and his actions from that moment onward, even and until his assassination. It now sets the stage for the world's understanding of his significant contributions to the unity of the African diaspora. El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz stood firm in his faith, and the world is so much better for it. Be blessed. Here's my question for tonight. What does "by any means necessary" mean to you in your walk with the Lord? Can I ask it again? What does "by any means necessary" mean to you in your walk with the Lord? To bring everyone back to the same page, let me just give you a brief overview of who my guest, A. Peter Bailey, is. He was a founding member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU, organized in 1964 by Brother Malcolm X. Bailey was editor of the OAAU newsletter, Blacklash, and he was one of the last few persons to speak with Brother Malcolm on the day of his assassination, February 21st, 1965. He served as one of the pallbearers at his funeral. A. Peter is an accomplished author, journalist, and lecturer who draws from his vast reservoir of historical and cultural knowledge and uses his powerful voice to inform, educate, and inspire. He writes a bi-monthly column entitled Reality Check for the Trice Edney Wire Service. He is the former president of the C. Dolores Tucker Legacy Branch of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the ASALH, and founder of Positive Black Folks in Action. My brothers and my sisters, Matters of Faith family, again, my guest, A. Peter Bailey.
All right. So it's on you now, my good brothers. Back at you. Talk about your book. I'm going to put the pictures up so they can look at them. But you talk about your book.
Okay. The current book that I'm working on has a specific purpose of showing Brother Malcolm and what he was doing internationally. That's the whole focus of the book. It's what he was doing internationally. Because most people, that is practically completely ignored. And practically everything you see written about him or made and filmed by him, they just almost totally ignore what he was doing internationally. Brother Malcolm, let me first say what Brother Malcolm was to me. Brother Malcolm was a great human being. He was a great Black man. He was a great Pan-Africanist, and he was a master teacher. Those are the four things that he was. And anybody who's those four things is someone who's extremely valuable to any group of people. And Brother Malcolm was all of those things because he believed in education, not the type of education that we were getting in the American school system, but in the real education. He believed strongly in education. Anybody who call themselves and say they follow Brother Malcolm and they don't believe in education, they're listening to the wrong person. Brother Malcolm, this whole idea that he went to some kind of change after he went to Mecca, no, Brother Malcolm came back and he sent a letter. He sent a statement that he directed to what he called sincere whites. And in that letter, he said to white people, if you are a good person, what you need to do is to find other white people who think like you. Then you all get together and you all work in the white community against the white supremacists. You are not going to be a member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Now that's the bottom line. So this whole idea that somehow people like try to give that all of a sudden he became, you know, kind of a modified version of integration is simply not true. He was a Pan-Africanist. He believed in the absolute necessity of people of African or your origin around the world, but especially in North America and on the continent of Africa, needed to work more closely together. Because the people who were out to get us, they looked at us first and they saw the color of our skin. Once they did that, then they started dividing us into different things. But the first thing they saw is that we were all Black, you know, Black people, or descendants of Black people. And so he believed that we as a people should work together and work with each other and develop relationships with each other. He believed, when I say he was a strong Pan-Africanist, he believed that the fate of Africa and the fate of people of African descent in North America were completely bounded together. There was no way either group was going very far without the other. And in 1964, he went on a trip to Ghana to push his position. One of his major things that he was trying to do during the last year of his life, brother, was to take the United States government before the UN Commission on Human Rights for being either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of Black people. Now, anybody knows what was going on between 1955 and 1965, when he was mainly on the scene, would know there was some horrific things going on in this country at that time. Crimes being committed by white supremacists, and the governments were saying they couldn't do anything about it. In Little Rock, when they were violating and brutalizing those 9 youngsters in Little Rock, President Eisenhower said he couldn't do anything. He didn't make a move until one day somebody showed him the front page of a Russian newspaper, and they had all these pictures on there what was going on in Little Rock. The next day he nationalized the Arkansas National Guard to protect those kids. In Birmingham in 1963, when John F. Kennedy was president, and those kids were being bitten by police dogs and knocked down with fire hoses, Kennedy kept saying, well, you know, that's a state problem, until somebody told him how this was being used against the United States propaganda-wise. And so Kennedy all of a sudden, he nationalized the Alabama National Guard to provide a protection for those young people. So Brother Malcolm understood this. He believed that the United States was violating the Charter on Human Rights. And that's why we call our organization not a civil rights organization, but a human rights organization, because human rights is the international term. It is human rights. In 1964, he went to Africa to push his, to try to get African countries to at least some to be willing to take our case. Because the way it was, if your country had not, or the place where you lived had not signed the UN Charter on Human Rights, then the UN couldn't do anything. In other words, an individual, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna say couldn't, what I'm saying is this. Because the United States had not signed the charter, an individual person could not take our case to the UN. It had to be done by a UN member. So Brother Malcolm spent much of the last year of his life in Africa, trying to get some of the African leaders to take our case before the UN Commission on Human Rights. And in 1964, when he was traveling in Africa, he had audiences, brothers and sisters, not meetings. I meet you at a reception, we talk for 2 or 3 minutes, then you move on. He had audiences ranging from 1.5 hours to 3 hours with President Ezekwe of Nigeria, President Nasser of Egypt, President Nkrumah of Ghana, President Nyerere of Tanzania, President Kenyatta of Kenya, President Toure of Guinea, and Prime Minister Obote of Uganda. These African leaders, presidents, most of them, one was the prime minister. What they did, they had audiences with him, man. Not, he met with each one individually from 1.5 hours to 3 hours. As a result of that, when they had the second Organization of African Unity meeting in Cairo in July of 1964, they invited him, not as a participant, but as an observer. First time an African American had been invited like that. Brother Malcolm went to that conference. He issued an 8-page document to to the African leaders at the conference, plus to everybody else who was there, the press, all the people who were there, and which he said in detail as to why it was so important for people on the continent and people of African descent in North America should work closely together. He issued it. As a result of what he did and the statement that he issued and the positions that he was advocating to the African leaders, in September, I think it was 1964, the OAU members issued a resolution condemning discrimination in the United States. That had never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. Now, I'm not going to say it was the most militant thing ever written, but it was the first time that these African countries issued a resolution condemning discrimination and racial things that were going on in the United States. That was a direct result of what Brother Malcolm did. And I feel rather certain, brothers and sisters, that when the African countries did that, that's when the CIA and the FBI and those boys said, hey, we got to watch this dude. If he can get them to do that, man, you know, we got to deal with him. You know, and he strongly believed that our fates were together, man, and that we had to. And also, besides being a great Pan-Africanist, which is what he was, and it wasn't some kind of accident. Brother Malcolm's mother was a correspondent for the Garvey newspaper when they were out in Michigan. His father was a part of the Garvey movement. So that was in his family. And when he finally got old enough and, you know, started being more active in things, his older brother told me, I met his older brother after the assassination, he told me that we joined the Nation of Islam because of all the organizations out there. We felt as though what they were doing, especially economically, came closest to what Garvey had been advocating. So that's why they joined. And then they got Brother Malcolm to later join the Nation of Islam. And even when Brother Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam, brothers and sisters, he was reaching for unity. I have a letter that he wrote in 1963. He wrote a letter to the civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King, Whitney Young of the Urban League, Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, James Farmer of CORE, and about 3 or 4 more. He invited them to speak at a Nation of Islam rally in Harlem. And he said to them, if capitalistic Kennedy and communistic Khrushchev, who's then the leader of Russia, can get together and talk about things with each other, then we should be able to do so. And so when we're having a rally, and I'm inviting all of you to come to this rally and speak, and I guarantee you'll be treated with respect. Unfortunately, not a single one of the civil rights leaders responded to that invitation. What I'm saying is that this happened in 1963, when he was still in the Nation of Islam. So he always had that concept that we should be, you know, that we should be working together as a people. Our organization should be trying to work with each other and not opposing each other and talking about each other and putting each other down in the press, because the press, of course, every time they get anything by Black people arguing with you, fighting with each other, they were ready to print it. And so that is why, and then of course, as a master teacher, Brother Malcolm was the one, like I said, I was introduced to history when I went to Howard University when I was 20 years old. But the person who made me understand the absolute importance of history was Brother Malcolm, because he spoke a lot about our history doing his speeches and everything. And I will always remember him teaching us. But besides that, he taught like basic things. I'll just give you a quick example. In the very first issue of the OAAU newsletter, I was the editor of the newsletter. He's the reason that I came to journalism. And I had covered the trial, the situation where in 1964, where this white policeman shot and killed this 15-year-old white Black boy. And it caused a big uprising in Harlem and everywhere. So I went down to, you know, as the editor of the newsletter, I went down to cover this and find out what was going on. And the very first newsletter, I interviewed students who had been there, who had witnessed it. And at that time, Brother Malcolm was in Africa when that happened, although some New York City newspapers were saying that he was at some secret hideaway over in another part of New York, directing the Harlem uprising in 1964. That's what they were saying. but he was in Africa at that time. And he would call back to the office to get an update as what was going on from everybody who had different positions, like the head of the youth committee, the economics committee, the political committee, the education committee. He would ask, an update on what they were doing. So when it was my turn as the editor of the newsletter, I spoke to him and I read to him what I had written. And when I got to the line, I said, "Eyewitnesses to the murder." And Brother Malcolm stopped me. He said, "No, Brother Peter, you can't call that cop. You can't say murder and call him a murderer, because those are legal terms. You can only use once the person has been convicted. If you use it and then he's acquitted, and we know he's going to be acquitted, then he can sue you for defamation." And he said, "Call him a killer and refer to it as a killing, because he's a killer, and it's a killing no matter what the circumstances." That was a lesson I learned from Brother Malcolm, the master teacher. And as a journalist, I've kept that throughout. I've remembered that throughout my entire life. I've remembered that. Don't get in trouble for something you say or write because you did something or said something out of ignorance. Now, if you say something and you know what you're doing and you're prepared to take the cut, fine. But many times we were just saying things out of ignorance. Man, he's a killer. He's a murderer. No, he's not. You can't say that. And when he was acquitted, as we knew he was going to be, he sued Martin Luther King's organization. He sued CORE for distributing flyers in Harlem or describing him as a murderer. That was one of the lessons I learned from Brother Malcolm. Brother Malcolm taught us another lesson. He said, if we're having a meeting and we're talking about different things with Black people and what we should be doing that, and all of a sudden somebody at the meeting stand up and say, we ought to go downtown and bomb this, or we ought to go downtown and tear this place up. He said, stop the meeting and put that person out. Because 9 times out of 10, the person who says that is an informant for the FBI or the New York City Police or somebody like that. And he said that if we discuss that for even 2 or 3 minutes, they can then accuse us of some kind of advocating violence or threatening and that kind of thing. And you totally
innocent. Violent acts against the city or against individuals. So yeah, you could do that. Yes.
You may be totally innocent, but you may have to spend a whole year or 2 of your life spending money and time, fighting that case when they know they have a weak case, but they want to keep you tied up. That was another lesson he taught us. Don't be so quick to follow those people who be talking the loudest and screaming the loudest. Sometimes
say that again because I think a lot of people need to hear that. Don't be so quick to follow behind who?
The ones who are shouting the loudest and talking the loudest.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes they may not really know what they're saying, or even more deadly, they may be informers who are trying to get you to join them in saying something so they can get you for something you said, not for something you did, and keep you tied up in the courts for a year or 2 for something that you said. And that happened a lot with some of the the Black organizations at that time in the late 1960s. They got in a whole lot of trouble, not because something they did, but something they said because they didn't understand what Brother Malcolm had taught us about knowing what you're going to say. Call him a killer and refer to it as a killing. Because if he kills somebody, he's a killer, and so those are the kind of lessons that I learned from him. And I'm gonna, kind of stop back. There's other stuff I can go on, but I'm gonna stop to give the brother a chance because you may have questions you might want to ask him.
Well, I tell you, I'm enjoying this, and I know that the folks who are watching are enjoying it as well. So let me share with you some of the things that they're saying. All right, because that's what I like. I like to bring in the conversations from the other side so that we can hear what they're saying and whether or not how they're responding to what you're saying. Because for me, you are the expert here tonight. I'm here to listen just like everybody else. I'm learning stuff. I did not know. I knew that Malcolm was an internationalist. I knew about the letter. I knew about his statement that you can work among yourselves, but you can't be a part of this organization. I remember that because I'm a big fan of Malcolm. I think his philosophies were on point, and I think that if we literally listen to him and not get kind of blown away by the boogeyman that that says a lot of stuff and perhaps we get too frightened of him. But if you listen to what he has to say, his philosophies and his positions were real and they were valid. Sharon says, you know, Sharon, in order to sustain ourselves in this country, blacks must become economically independent. Now, my cousin, who is a firm, he's firm in his faith, he says, to me, by any means necessary means there is nothing on this earth that can keep me from returning to the Heavenly Father, from change, transformation, the ultimate miracle we can seek from the Heavenly Father. Sharon then comes around and says, when the Lord is the center of your life, all things are possible and achievable. And so he says, amen, bro, talking about you. I kind of get what you were saying, but a generational curse cannot be fixed by man's law or return to the Heavenly Father for change. Transformation is the best decision we have ever made. So my cousin, he's very much involved. He looks at the spiritual side of everything. And so Sharon says, an invaluable Black history lessons, period, with an S. And that's what you're sharing with us. I want to hear more because I'm intrigued. I think that what you're saying to us is not only educational, but it's also inspiring and directing. Because if we're inspired and we can be directed, then we can actually work to make these changes. Humanity is important. You know, you're right. This has always been a human issue. So when they look at other countries, and of course, you know, the United States is always quick to point a finger at other countries and say, you are violating the human rights of others. But they still do that to us today. We're still violated. That's why we call this thing that we're experiencing in today's time systemic racism, because it touches every aspect of our lives, and it still exists today. And so I'm not going to stop you at all. I want you to continue to say, and by the way, Jerry says words matter regarding what you talked about when you were talking about murder and killing. Yes, if you kill someone, that's dead. You killed them. Now, whether or not you're convicted as a murderer is a different story. And so you're right. I was the director of public relations for a few years, and I do understand that you can't just say anything because you feel it. Your emotions can't run you. And I'm a columnist. I write a column, and I can't say anything in the column because if I do, then if it slanders someone, then I'm liable for that. So yeah, and you're a journalist, you're a lecturer, you're an author, you do all of the things I like. And so thank you for sharing with us and opening our eyes to understand that, you know, some things you can't, just because it pops into your head doesn't mean you have to come out your mouth.
Right. You have to learn. See, you have to learn. If you're going to defeat the system, you have to learn how it works. Mm-hmm. And for instance, if I had said eyewitnesses to the murder, they would love to have then come in and that cop then later sued me or sued the organization.
Right.
And we may have beaten, even if we beat the case, that would for at least a year and a half, we would have been spending money and energy fighting that rather than doing what we were trying to do as an organization. Because the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was the organization that Brother Malcolm founded, we had a policy, and also we had an education division, we had an economics division, we had a political division, we had a youth division, we had an international division. You know, in other words, we were basically set up, and unfortunately for us, we began meeting, as far as I can remember, was in January 1964. The organization was publicly announced in June 28, 1964. But we only had 8 months before Brother Malcolm was assassinated.
Right,
and
right.
He spent much of that time, and not all of it, but a considerable amount of that time, pursuing his international thing, which was to take the United States government before the UN Commission on Human Rights.
Right.
And so we had the organization going. We were doing things in Harlem, and I remember on February the 21st, which is today, which we're commemorating today, the day Brother Malcolm was assassinated. There was about 5 of us backstage with him. I was one of the 5 people backstage, and he said to us, he said, you know, I've been invited to speak by SNCC to speak at a meeting they're having down in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'm going to go to that meeting and speak. And then when I come back, I'm going to spend the next 6 months building up the OAAU. Now, if he had been able to do that, brother, we would still be functioning. But that, of course, was the day that he was assassinated. And I think that I always like to give when people, when we talk about the assassination of Brother Malcolm, brother, and everybody wants to, make it sound like it was just another case of black on black, crime, black on black homicide.
Right.
And what I always say to them, well, let me tell you a few things. Anthony Summers, a British writer, a white British writer, he wrote a book on J. Edgar Hoover. I think it came out in 1993. And he quotes Hoover as saying to Senator Lyndon Johnson. Now, if he said it to Senator Lyndon Johnson, that means that it was before 1960, because Johnson became vice president in 1960. And Hoover said at this luncheon, he said to Johnson, quote, "We wouldn't have any problem and we could get those two guys fighting and we could get them to kill one another off," end of quote. You know who those two guys were? Brother Malcolm and Dr. King.
Yeah.
Now Hoover, this is before 1960, and he's already nervous about the potential of these two brothers. That's the only mention of Brother Malcolm in that book. It's about 500 pages. But that's what that British writer said. Now some people say, well, all I know, the British writer wrote this in his book. Then, the FBI set up something they call COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program. And it was designed almost specifically to go after black organizations who they felt were considered dangerous. And in one of they had a list of their goals and objectives. And there was one that said, we must, now these were their words, brother. I'm not making these words up. We must prevent the rise of a black messiah. Malcolm X could have been one had he not been killed. Then it goes on to list 3 people who they think might fit into this category. They say Elijah Muhammad, Martin Luther King, and Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture. Then it said, well, forget about Elijah Muhammad, he's too old. Then it focused on Dr. King and Stokely. And what happened? This is in COINTELPRO. We must prevent the rise of a black messiah. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and Kwame Ture, Stokely, was for all practical purposes, what do you call it? When you force somebody out of the country, I can't think of it.
Well, the ostracized is one, but when you put them out of the country, then you are expatriatizing them.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
But that shows you the depth of Hoover's attitudes about Brother Malcolm and Dr. King, and both of them ended up assassinated. So we have to understand that this didn't just happen. And anybody who talks about these two brothers Martin Luther King and Brother Malcolm, we all seen that famous picture where they met very briefly at the airport. And they were going to different things, and they were behind on their plane, so they couldn't talk long, but they took this photograph. And I always believe that eventually, I've talked to people who were very close to Dr. King's camp and very close in Brother Malcolm's camp. And I've always, people said, that there was a plan that these two brothers were going to eventually have a meeting with each other. They never met except that one time at the airport, but they were going to have a meeting with each other and see about, where they could work together. Can you imagine if those two brothers had been able to come together?
Every day I think about it. Lord.
That Dr. King who they, and of course the King people, from what I understand, and I believe this, I think they were told, if you want this holiday, you cannot mention anything about April the 4th. You notice they don't have to do nothing about April the 4th.
Right.
Which is the day he was assassinated.
Right.
And you got to reduce him to I have a dream. That's it.
Right. We'll give him a day.
I personally will not go to anything around Dr. King with the word dream in it.
Mm.
Nothing. If you want to know where Dr. King was, read a book that came out in 1967, less than a year before he was assassinated, called Where Do We Go From Here? Question, Chaos or Community.
Mm.
Dr. King has some stuff in that book, brother. I have read to students because I've also taught at 3 universities and I've lectured at about 30 or 40 universities around the country. I have read that quote and I say, who said that? Some quotes from that Dr. King have in that book. And they say, oh, that's Malcolm X or somebody like that. I said, no, that's Dr. King. Because they don't hear about that book. The King supporters, the big name Kings, they don't even mention that book, hardly. And they practically never quote it. Because there's some stuff in that book, man. If people you think that's not the Martin Luther King that we know about, we would not even think that's him. Some of the stuff he says in that book. And when I read it, sometimes I'd be saying to myself, boy, Brother Malcolm they'd been together on this, or they would have been together on that, some things when he talks about unity and economics and this kind of thing and psychological warfare and this kind of thing. I'd be saying to myself, man, they would have been together on this. And I think that's what this government was aware of, that an alliance between those two brothers would have been absolutely something that they did not want to happen under any circumstances. And we have to be aware of that. And I think that one of the things we need to do today is the people who are strong supporters of Brother Malcolm and the people who are strong supporters of Dr. King, we need to get together with each other.
Yeah.
We need to get together with each other and sit down and talk concretely about things we can do to carry out the guidelines that these two brothers provided us. We really need to do that.
Well,
they gave us great guidelines, man, to work under if we were paying attention, man. They gave us some great guidelines to work on, but we don't do it. We don't do it.
Well,
So,
I'm taking this as more than an introduction to it, because I am an admirer and a follower and a passionate advocate for both the philosophies of Dr. King and Malcolm X. El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, I love them both because both of them rest firmly in my spirit. And I'm a Baptist preacher. Malcolm's father was a Baptist preacher, so the roots are still there. And so I'm with this. I think we really need to, bring these things to the surface and then access all of the resources that we have available to us. And we have tremendous resources. I've said this before, that in the African American community and the Black community, the Pan-African community, we have people at every level of leadership in the government, in business. We can do this now because we've got people in those key places. If we would just simply stop believing the hype and start believing the right, that they were not at odds with each other. They just saw things differently for a time, but ultimately their visions came together. They collided because they were on the same. The goal was the same. The streets that they traveled were different, but the goal was the same, and those streets were ultimately going to intersect. And I think that's what we're doing right now. Brother Peter. We're intersecting where those lines merge.
And I think, like I said before, in my book, I'm focusing almost solely on what Brother Malcolm was doing internationally.
Got you.
I'm going to include documents. The first section is going to be Brother Malcolm speaking. I write a long introduction, but the first section is Brother Malcolm speaking in newsletters and in letters and documents, him speaking about what he was trying to do internationally. The second section are going to be the FBI files. I got the FBI files on the OAAU.
Oh, good.
And that's going to be the second section of the book. And you're going to see how closely they were watching the OAAU, and they were and comments and commentary and things like that. The third section is going to be all 9 issues of the OAAU newsletter. At that time, we were covering what Brother Malcolm was doing internationally more than anybody else probably in the country. And most of at least 6 of the 9 issues have pictures of Brother Malcolm in the front with an African leader of one time or another.
Right.
And then the fourth section is going to be coverage in the press and in columns and in books about what Malcolm was doing internationally. And I want to say again, to show you again, how many people, now I know people that know very little about what Malcolm was doing internationally. I don't think that, because most things about him, man, they never focus on that. They never really get into that in any kind of detail. And I'm using original material, the primary source material, in probably 85% of the cases in this thing. I'm writing a rather long introduction, but the rest of it is primary source material.
What's the name of the book, Doc?
Brother Malcolm X's Strategic Pan-Africanism. And the subtitle is An Important Guide for People of African Descent. Brother Malcolm X's Strategic Pan-Africanism. And the subtitle is An Important Guide for People of African Descent. And by the way, again, Dr. King, how many people are aware that in his Nobel Peace Prize speech, when Dr. King got the Nobel Peace Prize, you know what he said in that letter, in that speech? He talked about tying the civil rights movement to the liberation movement that was going on in Africa. I mean, you know, when many of the African countries are coming out of colonialism. Most people don't know that.
You don't listen to it.
Dr. King, the reason they went after Dr. King so viciously because of his position on the anti-Vietnam War.
Absolutely, absolutely. When he did that, right there, Riverside Church in the Manhattan, right in Harlem.
You hear me? You hear me?
Yeah.
And then he spoke out against when the United States went into the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if Dr. King had just stayed right in the United States and never talked about it.
Yeah, just desegregate the buses and the trains and stuff. That was enough.
He probably still be around.
Been fine.
He probably still be around.
Yep.
You know, just like I said about, you know, these two brothers, they feared these two brothers. And they feared them because not only did they have a strong national, but they had international appeal. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on in the book that I'm working on.
Yeah.
What he's doing internationally, and why there was this, you know, this strong effort to they were concerned. I got letters written by ambassadors to you know, one of the things, you know, I don't want to say this because some people who are big James Farmer fans might get upset. But one of the people that the State Department sent to Africa to kind of counter what Brother Malcolm was doing, James Farmer. And the ambassador, I think it was in Kenya, he sent a letter back to the State Department in America. I just got the last sentence in the letter. He says, farmers visit helpful, able to undo in part damage caused by 2 Malcolm X visits. Did you hear me? Farmer visit helpful, able to undo in part damage caused by 2 Malcolm X visits. And that's a letter from the American ambassador in Africa, one of the African countries, and he sent that letter back to the State Department in DC. I mean, so, you know, and I got other letters written by, you know, in their public domain, you know, letters written by ambassadors commenting and being concerned about the effect that Brother Malcolm was having, you know, when he was traveling in the African continent and how people were listening to him. There was some Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, had some kind of, they were celebrating some big holiday in Kenya. And they had people on who were guests of the president on stage of Kenyatta. Guess who was one of the guests? Brother Malcolm.
Really?
Sitting on stage.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this is, you know, this is all part of it, man. This is all part of it, man. And I'm not claiming that this book is going to be the definitive book on that subject of Brother Malcolm Jeanette. But what I want it to be is give people an introduction so that they will not get over this idea that, you know, that his assassination was just another case of black on black, homicide, and tell you who else had a vested interest in him not being around, and who had the power and the persuasion to make sure that happened.
Yeah, I get it. Can I ask you a question? I was just sitting and thinking. I was looking at the ages of these three individuals that actually mark the for the most prominent of our leaders,
Assassinated.
Malcolm, Martin, and Medgar. Their ages. I mean, as I think about it, I mean, I'm twice as old, almost as all of them. 30. Malcolm was 39. King was 39. Medgar was 37.
Yeah.
So, and I know now that at 37, 39, 30, that I didn't know hardly nothing. But these guys were I mean, literally were world changers. They were making changes in the world. Like, so if they didn't leave, if they didn't get rid of them, ain't no telling what they might have been able to accomplish had they lived and had they merged themselves as they were talking about doing.
And as I try to show what might have happened in the play.
Right.
If those three brothers had the people who support those three brothers had been able to get together and start working together, man, we'd be 10 times ahead of where we are now as a people.
Yeah, I think about, the impact that they had and they continue to have. But then I think about the lack of influence they have with so many of our youth in particular. And when I say youth, I'm talking about people maybe under 40 years old, because many of them, I know that, they don't teach this history in schools. And so the whole idea of, what's the name of this the new paradigm? This is what they're calling it today. What is it?
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory, right? That's not important, And I know where it comes from, but the idea that the philosophy comes from, which is ludicrous. But
let me tell you my position on that. And again, I got this position because of the knowledge of Brother Malcolm. We should stop wasting our times trying to get public schools to teach our history to our children. It is not going to happen. It would be much more easier and more effective if Black sororities, Black fraternities, Black civic organizations, Black churches especially, Black business organizations, any kind of major national Black organizations should make it a part of their agenda to teach our children our history. It's not going to be done by anybody else. I went to Catholic schools from 1st grade through 8th grade. I went to public high schools, and on those from grades 1 through 12 back in those days, I didn't learn nothing about Black history, nothing. And to show you what I mean, even the white folks have problems with each other in this area. For instance, when I was in elementary school, I went to a Catholic school taught by white Catholic nuns. You know what they taught us about? The Protestant Revolution. When I get into the public high school, segregated public high school, I was taught about the Protestant Reformation. When I was in the Catholic school, I was told that Queen Elizabeth I, those nuns called her everything but a hoe. When I got into the public high school, she became a great British heroine in British and American history. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And
yes, I do.
And so history, we were taught about Saint Thomas. I call him Saint Thomas Jefferson and Saint George Washington. And yet both of these men owned, bought, and sold over 200 African men, women, and children. They are never going to teach us that in the public schools. we have got to take it upon ourselves to teach our children their history, because it is never going to be taught in the public schools. Now, what we can make sure is they don't be teaching any anti-Black stuff.
Right. That's good. That's right, because then they can undo a lot of good stuff that was done.
Right.
Like they said about Malcolm, right? They do the same thing to us.
But they think that they're going to teach us about people like Martin Delany. You know what Frederick Douglass said about Martin Delany?
What's that?
Who they were around at the same time? Martin Delany. I bet you most I have never heard of. Frederick Douglass said, "I thank God I was born a man. Martin thanks God he was born a Black man."
Mm.
Martin Delany was a Pan-Africanist back in the 1850s and 1860s and 1870s. You know, and he and Douglass worked together at sometimes. Because he was also founded a newspaper journalist. So, you know, these are the kind of things we have to teach our children, brother.
Right.
And I want to tell you, brother, I gotta do something. I'm going to have to go off in about 3 minutes.
Okay, if that's what you have to do.
Yeah, because
I need the last few minutes to close out anyway, so that'd be perfect. So if you give me 5 minutes, we'd be good. If you can give me 5 minutes, we'll be perfect. So, but you know what you're saying, it makes so much sense, because, and this has been my perspective. You know, I'm a Baptist preacher. I believe scriptures. But here's the thing, right? If you don't give people information, they can't make decisions. They can't think, because they don't have the information to process. So you've got to give them the information. Let people make up their minds. Just give them the tools to work with. If you give them the tools, people will come to the right decisions, but you got to give them the tools. What we have not been doing over the years is equipping our folks to be critical thinkers how do you gather the information? You did something, you expressed it well. You talked about this new book, and you have all of this information that you gathered together. You know how to get the information to put it together. That's what we need to teach our folks, so that they were able to put things together, and then they can be able to use that information to the betterment for themselves, the community, our society, humanity as a whole. Right.
We have to understand it, and this is especially important with the teaching of history, man. It's no way that these folks are so determined to teach this history the way they want it.
Right.
They know how absolutely critical that is. They know how that man who recently won the governorship of Virginia, he won for one reason, because he opposed the teaching of the real history of Virginia.
Right.
And that's why he won that election. He didn't win it for no economic reasons he won it because his position was that teaching the real history is the detriment. Mm-hmm. And white Virginians put him in office.
Yep.
And that's going to be used. You can bet your life in the upcoming elections. That's
Absolutely.
going to be used by many politicians.
That's right.
As a way to try to get enough, because they understand the importance of the teaching of history, brother.
Right. Don't tell us. Don't remind us of who we are. We don't want to know.
We have to understand that. And I want to, close out by saying to the folks, man, make sure that you all those organizations you belong to, make sure that they take it upon themselves to have at least part of their agenda, the teaching of Black history to our children.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree. And by the way, I'm going to say this in my closing, but for sure, you need to come back here some more. I need you to continue to teach, because you're one of those master teachers that we need to hear from on a regular basis. So just put it on your calendar, because I'm going to have you coming back. And I'll put you together with some others, because I really wanted to. You're the only guest I have tonight, because I knew that you would have a wealth of information that you needed to share, that you had to share. And I didn't want anybody interfering with your ability to share that information with us. So I want to thank you. I tip my hat to you. I love you, and nothing you can do about it, so get used to it. And I'm going to have you back, and we're going to do this again real soon, because it's important that we do what we have to do. So let me go ahead and close out. And Doc, if you have to leave in a moment or two, I get that. It's okay. And
Okay.
I'll just say my family farewell.
I really have to, because I'm expecting a call from a grandchild.
You go ahead and do that, and I'll just close out. And let me just thank you in advance, and I'll thank you again in my final closeout. But I just want to thank you so much for your information. Thank you so much for unpacking so much about Malcolm that we could not know unless it was someone like you to tell us. So thank you, my brother.
Thank you for providing this opportunity.
No, you're welcome. You are more than welcome.
That we know, like I said before, I'm gonna close out by saying it again.
Mm-hmm.
The brother was a great human being, a great Black man, a great Pan-Africanist, and a master teacher.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. God bless you, man. Be well. Be well. Be well. I tell you what I'm going to do for everybody who's still with us. I'm going to, and as A. Peter Bailey dismisses himself and leaves, I'm going to share with you again some of the photos that I had on the screen before as I close out our session tonight. But you know, it's not easy for the world to embrace Malcolm's transformed view that A. Peter Bailey spoke of, especially in the Black community. We like the Black militant Malcolm, who stood firmly in his faith and advocated for Black power and talked about mental warfare in addition to the physical abuses we suffered. We like that guy. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that didn't change. It is more important for us to see the same passion and fierceness, the firmness in the internationalist, the humanist, even somewhat of a pacifist, as we saw in the nationalist. So we have to see Malcolm in all of his humanity. It is the short period of time between that time that he was known and became known as Malcolm X to his Hajj Malik al-Shabazz that sets the stage for the world's understanding of the significant contributions to and for the African diaspora who have been scattered all over the world. The work that Malcolm has done will continue to go on because he was about humanity. Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, stood firm in his faith, and the world is so much better for it. As a Baptist preacher who was born and raised in New York City, that's me, I have been more than fascinated by the nationalist. I am one of those who loves God and called according to his purpose, but like Malcolm, I was not always on the path that embraced love of everyone. My motto was, if it is not Black, I am not with that. Now, I know I'm not the only one who thought that way, and maybe not the only one who still thinks that way. But I'm changed now. I see things a little differently. Like Malcolm, I now understand the agape love of God that embraces the entirety of humanity. I've discovered that I could have stayed rebellious like the biblical character Ahaz in the scripture that I read that Isaiah wrote in his book. But the Lord led me to reshape my thinking like he did with Malcolm. You see, Ahaz remained obstinate. He missed it. Malcolm did not. The God who is everything for everybody, everywhere, every time, in every way, is standing at the door of your heart, and he's knocking. And I encourage you to open the door and let him into your life. A. Peter Bailey, what can I say besides thank you? I mean, truly, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your wisdom, your insights, your willingness to share has truly blessed the Matters of Faith family. I know you're not there right now. I know you've gone because you got to talk to your grandchild, which is really the first ministry that we've ever had. You have given us so much to think about in our efforts to claim our freedom in a still challenging world. Thank you, A. Peter Bailey. Now, the Matters of Faith family and those visiting with us tonight, I pray that something was said, something was done that helps you to understand that we are still embarked on a mission to achieve and to acquire and to sustain our freedoms, our dignity, by any means necessary. Now, I've already asked Peter, he's already agreed he's going to come back and join us again. And I'm so glad to say that. Now, usually, I've done this for the past few weeks. I didn't do it last week and I didn't do it the week before, and I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm not going to go back over all of the script, all of the titles of the articles I've written since March of last year. It's been about 12 months. I think that's enough. But I am going to encourage you to receive the overflowing love that seeks nothing in return. The love that theologians say operates in the human heart. I will encourage every man, woman, boy, and child to do that, not because you like people, but do it because you love them, because God loves humanity. I encourage you to find a way to live and strive for the freedom of all humanity by any means necessary. Now, don't forget our advertisers, the JLR Company, J. Lauren R. Consulting, LLC. For all of your church financial needs, just call 718-328-8096, 718-328-8096, or visit our website, www.jlaurenrussellconsulting.com. That's www.jlaurenrussellconsulting.com, jlaurenrussellconsulting.com. It's not about the castle. It's all about the kingdom. And please don't forget to get my book. If you don't have it already, I put it up on Smashwords. You can get it as an ebook. But this is the book. If you want a hard copy, all you have to do is go to my website. Not even go to my website. Just send me a cash app through $ Matters of Faith. The book is $22.80, which covers shipping. Or you can get it as an ebook, and there's a 50% discount. It costs you $10 if you do it as an ebook. Neighbors Home Care is waiting for you to contact them. They have a fully unionized job waiting for you if you're interested in home care, or if you know anyone who's interested in home care. 718-515-2200, 718-515-2200. And don't forget about Triumph Physical Therapy for all your musculoskeletal needs. Call them before you take that pill or schedule that surgery, 212-234-2900. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our Matters of Faith YouTube channel. And again, thank A. Peter Bailey for a phenomenal conversation with us tonight. Now, the Lord bless you, the Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now, if no one has told you this tonight, let me be the first to say, I love you, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. So get used to it. God bless you, and good night, everyone. Take care. We'll see you soon. See you next week. Same time, same channel. You know the deal. I'll see you then.